I'm excited today because today our speakers are part of a dynamic duo. Today we have with us Ms. Kyra Woods and Mr. Cameron Woods. The CUT youth program alums continue to prove what you can do when you have truth, as Quran said, as the basis of your foundation. Cameron attends St. Ignatius High School on the west side of Chicago. He is a nationally ranked fencer and plans to, you want to applaud for that? That's good, all right. He is a nationally ranked fencer and plans to continue his athletic career in college. He has aspirations, you want to clap again, huh? All right. He has aspirations to study international relations and become a U.S. diplomat. Lord knows we could use his leadership. Kyra attended Walter Payton College Prep and graduated from Northwestern University in 2013. As an environmental engineer. She has traveled all across the world, most recently and most notably to Ghana to do research with clean water facilities, and to Guyana with the Peace Corps in 2014. Kyra is considering graduate work in the international development and environmental science. Kyra and Cameron are legacy members, or are the offspring of legacy members, Kathy and the late Charles Parker, Carolyn Edmonds, and Ms. Tanya Woods. Christ Universal Temple, I'm delighted to present to some and to introduce to others Mr. Cameron and Ms. Kyra Woods.
Good morning, church. Good morning. Or should I say, good morning, family. Yes, my name is Cameron Woods, and while all those things in my bio were true, before any of that, before the fencing, before the interest in international relations, I was a child of God. My journey in faith life began here at CUT from the earliest days of my childhood. My grandmother, Carolyn Edmonds, played an integral part of steering my life's path through these very doors. Being a part of Reverend Johnny Coleman's faith revolution tied my family with this church from some of its earliest years. Not only was she here, but my great-grandparents were as well. And my mother was raised in this church. So by the time my sister and I came along, it was only common sense that we'd end up here too. Without my amazing family and the first church family I ever came to know, I wouldn't be who I am today. As a little guy, there wasn't much I truly understood about the world. I knew that Santa came at Christmas, I had to go to school and get good grades, and I had to wake up early and get dressed up on Sundays for Sunday school. I never questioned why my mom made sure we never missed church, or why we only listened to gospel music on Sundays. That's just how life was. Little did I know that the seeds planted in my consciousness back then would sprout into the garden of knowledge that I would reap the benefit from now and every day in my life. The first idea that I held onto comes from a single word that I learned here at CUT, omnipotent. The dictionary defines omnipotent in two ways. One, being an adjective to mean all-powerful or all-knowing, especially of a deity, or able to do anything. The other, my personal favorite, is a noun that simply means God. That's got to be a record for shortest definition of a word ever. CUT taught me that God was everywhere. He was in the church. He was in the streets. He was in the laughter shared between family members at a dinner table. He was inside of me. To me, that was an incredible thought. I have very vivid memories of driving home from church in the back seat, pointing out the window saying, yep, God's over there. Yep, he's in that stop sign. Yep, he's in that grass, definitely. How is this possible? Because God can do anything. I couldn't touch, feel, or see him, and yet I could, just by casting a glance around the beautiful earth that he created for all of us to share. Omnipotence wasn't just the largest word in my vocabulary at the time, it was the most important. Because of this idea of an all-present, all-powerful Lord, my faith has remained strong, even in the face of adversity and doubt. Another idea given to me by this church that has stuck around comes from another singular word, worship. Now, church, I asked you, have you ever truly worshiped something? Now, think hard. I don't mean, oh, I worship these Thanksgiving leftovers. Praise be to candied yams and cornbread. Because that's called idolatry, and that's no good. True worship, in my mind, is a commitment of mind, body, and soul to one solitary idea, typically in relation to God. Growing up, one of the most exciting parts of church for me was the music, as I'm sure you would all agree, as we heard just now. The way that the voices and the instruments would blend in such magical ways soothed my soul and purged my heart of all worries. I always thought how it was so clever, how towards the end of sermons, the music would start to pick up, and it would feel so natural, as if it was there the whole time. That music was God. He was there the whole time and has always been. I was thankful to be in a space that taught me not just of the existence of a power like God, but why he was worthy of our praise, devotion, reverence, obedience, and efforts. I would go home from Sunday services humming whatever masterpiece was playing that day until the next Sunday when I got another one. I never truly appreciated the importance of celebrating God's might until I attended my first Catholic Mass at school. The entire time I just kept looking around thinking, all right, this is nice and all, but when are we going to start singing and clapping? Every church needs a Fred Nelson III. CUT most importantly taught me how devotion to God is done in more than just showing up to service. It's about active participation. It's about being completely present and tuning in to hear exactly what he wants you to hear that day. It's about realizing that the glory means much more than a Kanye West track. One of the most important lessons I've taken away is the power of prayer. I had always watched my grandma and my mother go through their fair share of trials and tribulations as a young child. And they would never hesitate to call upon the Lord, even out loud, for whatever it was they needed, be it strength, guidance, patience, or just peace of mind. Back then, I never truly understood that. And sometimes I still don't. Although when I was 10 years old, I had my own experience with relying on the Lord when I felt it impossible to go on. The summer of 2008 was a time I'll never forget. It was the summer that I lost my father to a blood clot. We had his services here in this very room. These seats were filled with my school friends wishing me well, family members as lost and confused as I was, and dozens of others who were there to support and love my family through the most difficult time we had ever faced. My brain remained dormant during those days. I didn't try to understand things. My life didn't make sense anymore. How was I supposed to live my life without my dad, my best friend, my hero? So many questions, and here I found myself in this room that had brought me so much joy and felicity just nearly a week ago. People kept telling me to pray on it, and that with time, God would ease my mind. I tried my best to talk to him, never 100% sure exactly what I was supposed to do. Did I kneel? Did I talk to him like he was my friend? Was there something I was supposed to Google to say? Here, 7 years later, I know more now, and I know that the effort and that the patience is what matters most. My relationship with God is my own to discover and to explore, and through prayer, I have created an even stronger bond to him. These are things that I learned at CUT. Yet, what use are those lessons without real-life application? Growing up in the church, I had been nearly oblivious to the multitude of supporters I had at my side. My first church family had supported and loved me through every endeavor I took on, and recognized the potential within myself before I ever could. Especially Reverend Helen Carey, my own personal guardian angel. I had spent most of my young years learning and taking in the lessons of CUT, but was nearing a time that I'd have to put action behind those words. Somewhere between 8th grade and high school is where I made my own transition from potential to practice. Not only was I going to attend a new school filled with new experiences to be had and lessons to learn, I was becoming a Roman Catholic. That Easter, I was baptized and confirmed into the Catholic faith, and would be attending a Catholic high school that fall. My life had become unrecognizable to years previous, yet those CUT seeds were just getting fed with new nutrients. There were new tenets, practices, and lines to memorize, but the ideas behind them remained the same. I was still worshiping the same God, no matter what form it took. Making that connection and reconciling the two pieces of my faith life that had once seemed so disparate made the transition easier and allowed me to get started on the great work I know God required of me. One of the first things I tackled in high school was strengthening my personal relationship to God. This seemed like a straightforward task, but I could not have been further from the truth. At school, we prayed every morning, almost in every single class, and even had mandatory spiritual retreats to go on. But I could still feel doubt in my heart. I still felt disconnected, and I couldn't figure out how to bridge the gap. The whirlwind of change in my life, along with all the new people and new environments I was experiencing, made it hard to make extra time for God. I was saying all the prayers, and I had good grades in my religion classes. Shouldn't that have been enough? I thought back to my CUT days and remembered that you couldn't just show up and expect to reap the benefits. You had to participate. You had to be an active member of God's family and take responsibility for your own growth in faith. I immediately changed my attitude. I began to ask more questions in my religion classes and get at the root of my wavering faith, as well as learning more beyond the lesson plans and beyond the homework. I read along with the gospel readings during Mass and discussed sermons with my mother afterwards over breakfast. During retreats, I would actively participate in discussions and even help facilitate some. It wasn't a perfect practice, but the net result was a stronger, deeper relationship with God. I understood more now my mother and my grandmother's reliance on him and was able to rely on him myself. I didn't feel strange leading prayer in class or taking time out of my evening to have a genuine conversation with God, even if only to thank him for the multitude of blessings he's given me. I now see God as less of this unimaginable, inaccessible source of power and more of a mentor that I can always count on to have my best interests at heart. My evolving relationship with God melds nicely with the increasingly amount of experience I have with prayer. Over the past couple of years, I've seen the way I pray take on many various forms. The most important prayers I say now are those of thanksgiving. This is because even when I'm having one of those days, there are always things to be thankful for. Food on my plate, a roof over my head, and most importantly, a family that loves me. These things that seem so simple, and I take them for granted. So whenever I can, I thank God for the simple things, because they are truly the most important things. There are times when I come to God in need, though, and that area becomes a bit trickier to navigate. Especially now with nearly everyone I know applying to college, it becomes difficult to have any other conversation with God other than, Lord, please let me get into Harvard. Or even, Lord, please don't let him get into Harvard so that I can get into Harvard. Just the other day, I had a conversation with a friend about how difficult it sometimes is to ask the Lord for personal things that we put so much weight on. I reassured her that this isn't hard. Instead of praying to get into whatever school or whatever program or whatever job you want, you just have to ask that your will be his will. When this is done, everything that you will ever want will be what is meant for you. CUT is the first place I learned anything about what God's will meant, and this idea has kept me focused throughout my entire life. Even so, I have my difficulties with it, but that's why prayer isn't something you just do once and forget about. There is a reason it's called the daily inspiration. The largest contribution CUT has had in the development of the young man I've become has been in my dedication to service. Service is the backbone of my school's teachings and ministry. There's an entire office dedicated to managing retreats and helping people find ways to put their faith into action through various service opportunities. Before high school, the closest I had ever gotten to service was just making sure that I had taken out the garbage and recycling bins every week. Clearly, I had some work that could be done. At my school, all freshmen are required to do at least 10 hours of service. We have a built-in freshman retreat where every freshman goes to a different service site for a day and then returns for small group discussions on the day's activities. For many, including myself, my freshman retreat was the first time I had participated in an organized service opportunity. Yet, I didn't feel like I had gotten much out of that day. I racked up the remainder of my hours participating in the recycling club, simply walking around the school, picking up cans again. Sophomore year, we had a requirement of 20 hours, and this time we had to participate in direct service and work at the same place for all 20 hours. I chose to work with a club at my school called the Community Tutoring Alliance, or CTA for short. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we would go to one of two elementary schools nearby and work with young kids around ages 7 to 12 with their homework. It was all basic stuff, adding and subtracting, learning about rhyming words, but that was only the experience at face value. For some of these kids, school was their escape from a broken home or other life challenges. Some kids had disabilities and always felt that they were worth less than the other kids just because it took them longer to finish their assignments or do another simple task. For whatever reason, the children we helped out were always so happy to see us. You kind of feel a little bit like a celebrity when you walk into a room and a dozen kindergartners are screaming their heads off because you and your friends showed up. It can get to your head. Knowing that giving up a little of my time to brighten the lives of these children just a little bit made me feel like I was walking away more complete than when I started. I chased that feeling into my junior year and tried to do more service opportunities outside of school and participated in some amazing causes. The most influential service opportunity I had was this past summer, where I, along with 5 of my classmates, traveled to West Virginia to work at a place called Bethlehem Farm, an intentionally Christian community that works to aid the people of the surrounding area in whatever they can, using as little as possible while doing it. I learned what it meant to be a steward of God's creation and to care for the earth as I cared for myself. I helped build roofs, organize clothes, organize a community mass, and tend to a farm for an entire week. Every person we met was so thankful for the work that we did, and it made me feel like I had truly made a difference in someone's life. That sense of global solidarity was something I first learned here at CUT, and I plan on holding on to that lesson for the rest of my life. It would be nearly impossible to explain to you all how much of an impact CUT has had on my life, and I am forever grateful that my journey began here. As I go on, I will remember to never forget my roots and the first home outside of home I had here in this church. And to all the youth in the audience, I have just this to say. The church will always have your best interests at heart, no matter what you may think. Allow yourself to be vulnerable, and let your heart be open to new ideas, new experiences, and new people. Someday, you will look back, and the pieces will all start to fit. And remember, all of this isn't going to work if you sit back and watch it all unfold without you. It works if you work it. Thank you.
That was kind of impressive. He's kind of cool. It is wonderful to be home. Thank you, Reverend Wells, Reverend McDowell, Reverend Carey, and the senior leadership here. The invitation was wonderful, and like I said, it feels wonderful to be home. And to share the stage with my little brother, too, because before he couldn't even reach this microphone, and now he's taller than me, so it's a little different, I guess. For a moment before I get started, I'd like us all to take a moment in prayer. If we could all bow our heads. God, we come before you in a spirit of thanksgiving, always appreciative for what you have done for us. And I ask that as I prepare to speak with your children, that you push Kyra aside and step forward. Let my tongue deliver the message that you see fit. Open our eyes, our hearts, our ears, and our senses, our souls to what you would have us learn today. Let there be less of me and more of you always. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Another quick aside. Anybody who's here from Sunday school or YEC or Collegiates from Christ, can you just give me a quick wave? All right. It is good to see you. I see you. And while we have each other's attention really quickly, I want to say on behalf of all the adults here, we love you, we bless you, and we appreciate you. As Cameron said, we stand behind you in what you want to do to progress this world, to build this community, to build this city up. We are in a place right now that needs great leadership, and the connection that you all have, not only to our God, but to those of us here, is really powerful. I want to be sure that you know that, frankly, I'm no more brilliant or powerful than any of you. The potential that you see in me, those are the same seeds that were sown here, that you have that same thing. As Cameron finished with, it works if you work it, that's all it takes. This could be you at any point. We've all been through some things already, no matter how young you are. And so I encourage you to reflect over some of your experiences, be they at school or at home, and to really realize that you've been able to put into practice so many things that you've learned here already. I encourage you to tell your story, if not from behind this podium, to your friends, to your family, because you're inspirational, and you can do so, so much. So with that, I want to be sure that I acknowledge you on this Youth Sunday, because we're happy that you're here. As adults, we are also responsible for you. We are your stewards. You are kind of lent to us briefly by God in this lifetime. And so I think it's our responsibility to prepare you with the tools to lead full lives, to lead successful lives. And those are the things that we learn here. As we are your stewards, we also are responsible for bringing you closer to God. As Christian families, that is our responsibility. So when your family here or your family at home is loving on you a little too hard, you feel, or whatever, I just need you to realize that it's with great intention. And it's because we see the potential in each of you, and we know the power that exists with each of you. Okay, so adults, you can open your ears back. As I mentioned, this is a church that, to me, is a very practical church. Growing up, I realized I had lots of little phrases like, it works if you work it, and like Cameron, I think omnipotent and omniscient were like really big words in my vocabulary for a 7-year-old, but it worked, and we were able to get by some really great things. As little as how am I going to get past this math test to losing our dad. As Cameron mentioned, that's one of the hardest things that I think either of us have gone through, possibly to date. It was one of the last times I was behind this podium. It was the hardest speech that I had to give, but understanding the omniscience of God and his omnipresence, I knew that he would not lead me into a situation that he was not able to bring me through, that he would never forsake me, whatever the challenge was. And if I didn't understand it, that's because as humans, we don't understand everything. If we tap into our Christ mind, there's far more peace of mind and understanding. If we let go and let God, we can allow him to bring us through those situations. And so losing my father at 17 was one of the darkest places, but one of the periods of my life that I allowed God to take center stage. I had to let it go and let him be great because I wasn't going to be able to do it. And frankly, plenty in my family weren't able to do it. And so collectively, we had to say, we know that God knows what is in our best interest and that he will never forsake us, and we will get through this together. I want to share with you this morning a few other instances where I really had to consciously pull upon our teachings here to help me consciously get through places. So losing my dad, I think, was the first place where I said, I have a wealth of information and tools to get through things, and I'm so grateful for my time at CUT. I'll fast forward to about 2012. I was in Ghana with an international development organization, and for those that don't know, I plan and will work within international development in the future. And so this was just one of those small ways to getting me there. While we were there, we took a trip as interns to the national park. Consider something like Yosemite or the Grand Canyon. And to get there, we needed to take a road trip. As the night fell, we had to take this long dirt road through this desolate, dark place. And what was so interesting is that at some point our bus stopped and you heard this crashing sound. Something cracked or something broke. I was in the last seat of the bus, and as I craned my head into the aisle to see what was going on, the bus lurched in reverse. The hum of the engine, which was right behind me, revved and screamed in my ear, which only intensified the fear and anxiety that I felt. As I leaned into the aisle to see what was going on, I realized our headlights caught the glint and reflected off of the machetes that were in the hands of men now in the street. There were spears in the hands of the men who simply came off the side of the road and now were advancing towards our bus. To say that I was not afraid would be lying, and I don't lie. But I did recognize that there was no place for both fear and faith. Everything that I saw with my human senses said I should be afraid. What I realized when I looked forward was that our bus driver had been hit and that he was bleeding out of his side. One of our interpreters was swearing in English and then all of a sudden began praying in his native tongue, which at first should be comforting but is actually quite scary because you realize this grown man who's 6-something is scared for his life. So our bus is now flying in reverse, and I realized before I could get a hold of it, the malignant thoughts of fear were multiplying in my mind, and I couldn't control it. Something in my subconscious, though, kicked in because I practiced the prayer of protection here for years. See, in difficult situations, and especially once you live life for a little longer and keep possibly the wrong company, we only know to immediately think of fear. We only know to complain, right? I know. I just started mine today. I'm working on it. And unfortunately, that doesn't allow us to tap into the Christ mind in our fullest capacity. So my mom made us practice the prayer of protection every morning as we got out of the car to go to school. The bus driver could be sitting there threatening to pull off, but she said, you have to say the prayer of protection. And so as I gathered my things and tried to get out the car and tell her, Mom, I'm going to be late, she didn't care, and we had to pray. And so it was at that time in 2012 when I realized that my mouth was praying and my brain was becoming more calm. I knew the words to say and grabbed the interns around me, and we began to pray together. Our bus driver hit a 3-point turn in the middle of the night with a 45-passenger van. After being hit, we continued down the road past a checkpoint we weren't really supposed to get through, but we luckily were able to get through. We were able to get to a hospital in the nearest town where the medical director happened to be the friend of one of the interpreters of our group. He happened to have arrived back from a trip the night before where he was gone for days, if not weeks, and happened to be able to take our bus driver into surgery if need be. He advanced all of the interns into the medical rooms and examination rooms to check out cuts and bruises and things like that. And as this all began to unfold, as I'm across the world in West Africa in a hospital, I first thought, how am I going to explain this to my mother? But look at God's grace. Time and time again, people said, we're so lucky. And I turned to them and I said, no. Don't get this twisted. This is not about a 4-leaf clover, a leprechaun, or a rabbit's foot. This is God's grace. Things are in divine order. And when you see divine order happen in real time, that will strengthen your faith. That will make you straighten up real quick and say, what was I worrying about? So in understanding that, remember that I pulled upon 1 John chapter 4, verse 18, where the book says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. And once I realized that God is love, and I, therefore, am love, that there was no room for fear at all. And I challenge you to remember that. There is no room for faith and fear. We'll come back to that later, okay? I want to fast forward to a time actually in college. Anybody that's been to college knows that it can be a lot of fun, but could also really take you through the ringer. And at Northwestern, I studied environmental engineering, and let me tell you, there were some trials and tribulations for sure there. It was about my junior or senior year, and I was experiencing a great deal of lack of self-confidence, to be completely honest. Not the best self-esteem, body image concerns. I just didn't feel smart enough sometimes. And I realized that there was no room for both of those things, that I couldn't be a king's kid and also be self-deprecating, that there was no room for me to sit and wallow in complaints and things if I was destined for great things, that I had to simply live those things out. So I remembered that here we practice an attitude of gratitude, right? And so it's important that in all that we do, that we be thankful first and foremost. But sometimes we need a reminder. And so I had to take pen to paper. I encourage many of you to do this. I encourage our youth and our adults to do this. That sometimes you just simply need to remind yourself who you are and who you serve. So I picked up an extra notebook that's really nothing fancy about it, and it's gone through some things. And I literally had to spell out for myself in statements that simply began with, I am, and speak my reality into existence. It's everything from I'm healthy, I'm lively, I'm energized, I'm brilliant, I'm loved, I'm loving, I'm fit, I'm articulate, and there are some pages where there's the same thing written over and over. Those are the moments where you just really need to believe with what you're saying. And what was so amazing was that I'm now able to go back into this book, and things are dated. And you can see the progress that I've made. I was nominated to be the homecoming queen in college. And when I first was nominated, I said, whatever, no big deal. I really need to focus on my grades. And then I realized, no, actually, I do want that crown. And this is not my best artwork, but at some point, I even just started drawing. You just have to put everything behind it, right? So actually, right above my queen with the crown, and that's me smiling very big, is also a check for, I don't know, $1 million or something like that. And I haven't got that yet, but I did get the crown. And it's wonderful to really see that What you put out into the universe, you know you get back. What you think about, you bring about, right? Exactly. That even if I had attained some of these things, I wrote them again because I wanted to continue reaping those things, that I needed to be grateful for those things. And so fast forward a little more to last year, I prepared to go to the Peace Corps. I was in a loving relationship. I was sent off by my family like 16 times. Some of you guys ended up at my house a few times to send me on my way. And after a month, I was evacuated from the country. I was in Guinea in West Africa, and the Ebola outbreak progressed in a way that the world had not expected. So after my experience in Ghana, I told my mom, I was like, I'm going. If something gets bad, they'll send me home, so stop worrying about it. You can't pray and worry, it doesn't work. So I left, and a month later, I came back home. My career plans dashed. I moved back home. I was not planning on doing that quickly. I was no longer in my relationship. So heartbroken and shattered, I think, does not necessarily get at exactly the intensity of what I was feeling last year. And I pulled out this exact same book and said, all right, let's go. We have to just make it work, because it works if you work it, right? So I want to also then remind you of what Exodus tells us, and this, again, need to understand who we are. In Exodus 3:14, God says to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you will say to the Israelites, I am has sent you. So when you are writing in your affirmation book, your journal, your gratitude book, whatever you may call it, understand that God is the great I am. When you are talking about yourselves to others, that God is the great I am, therefore, what you put at the end of that sentence is crucial. Because you're not just talking about yourself, you are talking about the greater being of God. So I dare you to say he's ugly or poor or broke or sick, because he's not. And if you want to be bound by those things, I'll leave that up to you, but that's not the life I'd like to live, right? Exactly. So that brings me now to a moment that we're at today. I'm actually at a crossroads, so it's really apt that I'm speaking today, and I had to do some self-reflection. I think the climate in our city and in our country is at one that requires that we elevate the consciousness of this world. And I think that I know that actually the people in this room get it, that you all are the tools by which we can do that. And that's ranging from the youth, be you 4 or 5 young man, to some of the eldest members in this place, that for every day you wake up and can draw breath, you are, for not even that, for every day you wake up and can think a thought, you are enabled to be a change agent. So young men and women, I encourage you to encourage the adults here. See, what happens sometimes is when we live a little longer, and I'm sure some adult has said to you, like, you won't get it because you've not lived so long, or I get it because I've lived so long. But what also happens when you live a little bit longer is that you can kind of get worn down by the world. When you start taking in what gets thrown at you from all types of sources, you don't really recognize the brilliance of yourself. And so it's important that you, our youth, remind our adults that you are blessed beyond what you can even think. He said he would deliver and give you more than what you could ask or think. So why do we continue to shackle ourselves with headlines that read injustice or violence or fear or racism or oppression or depression, when we should simply be speaking and living and carrying ourselves in a way that only promotes wisdom and peace and faith and prosperity? Those are the types of words that we need to use in our headlines, in our speech to others, our speech to ourselves. I call upon not only our youth leaders and not only our adults, everyone here, but for those of you who are community activists, for those of you who yield and can wield political power, I challenge you to bring the thoughts and principles that we teach here to those boardroom tables. When we can stop using the words that continue to confine us, think about the world that we could live in. And so with your thoughts, your actions, your reactions, with your words, with your feelings, I encourage you to be the change that we want to see. I encourage you to dream big, to be the architects of all the details of the prosperous and abundant life that you want to live and live in, the type of world that you want to give to that next generation. It's never too early to start. It's never too late to start for some others. And so with that, I say, God bless you, and I encourage you in this challenge.